Welcome back. All right, so I'm wearing a jersey that might very well be not around anymore as of this fall. So that makes this vintage. So vintage Coyotes for this. So I want to talk about underrated defensemen. So I talked about breakthrough players, bounce back players. Now I want to talk about defensemen that I feel are underrated. I wanted to do a video about defensemen. And when you're talking about bounce back years and breakthrough years for defensemen, points don't tell the whole story. There are defensemen that had very good seasons points wise, looking at Quinn Hughes. But we can look at his season and say it wasn't necessarily a great season. And then there were others I saw that their points might have been down a little bit, but I was like, well, Provorov didn't really have a bad year, so he's not looking to have a bounce back. I mean, wasn't necessarily as good as last year, but again, the metrics with defensemen could be a little bit different. So I want to talk about underrated defensemen. Defensemen that I feel, and again, this is just for me, may not get talked about enough. Now, this might be media that underrates, fans that underrate, or it may very well be you play for Arizona, you're probably not going to get the same amount of attention as a player might get somewhere else. So all that considered, let's do the top 10. We're going to jump into it at number 10 with a Winnipeg Jets defenseman that I've talked about on this channel a lot. And as the year went along, I thought his play got better and better. And I think that he's going to have quite the year coming up. So Logan Stanley, I think for right now, flying under the radar. And honorable mention to Keandre Miller. I don't have Miller on the list, but Keandre Miller as well. All of the attention going to Adam Fox, the contract for Jacob Trouba. It's easy for Keandre Miller to slip under the radar. But Logan Stanley, 37 games, 1 goal, 3 assists, 4 points. I think he's underrated at this point. I think that he was written off very early in his after his being drafted by the Jets, and I think he's a keeper, and I think he's due for some big things. So for me anyways, Logan Stanley's on the underrated list. Number 9. Going with the Islanders. Some teams have a lot of really good players, right? So in New York, you're going to have Leddy, you're going to have Pulock, you're going to have Pelech. So it's easy for Scott Mayfield to fly under the radar and be one of those underrated guys. 56 games, 2 goals, 13 assists, 15 points. Very important to the New York Islanders for that run to the Final Four yet again this year. I thought Mayfield had an excellent season. Probably an underrated defenseman. But again, an Islander fan, you can let me know in the comment section below why you think it's Pelech. But again, to me, Pelech and Pulock have got that attention now. They've got all of that press, I think, over the last couple of years. I think people understand now just how good Pelech is. Number 8. Going to Pittsburgh on this one. And I thought about, Marino. And then I thought, no, Marino at this point, no. We know what Marino is. But probably my favorite hardworking defenseman for Pittsburgh. And it makes a huge difference when Brian Dumoulin's in the lineup as opposed to when he's not. 41 games, 4 goals, 10 assists, 14 points. And acknowledging the points have nothing to do with it. The points are a bonus. Dumoulin defensively is a fantastic defenseman for Pittsburgh. And when he's in the lineup, their defense is better than when he's not. And that's really a measure, right? There are certain players that when they get hurt, it doesn't hurt the team much. But when Dumoulin's hurt, it definitely hurts Pittsburgh's chances. So for me, Dumoulin fits in at number 8. I think he's underrated. Number 7. Going to Toronto on this one. And I thought about a few different. But you know what? He's paid really well. I get it. But I think that when you're talking about the Toronto blue line, I think it's easy to understate just how important Jake Muzzin is and how good he can be. 53 games, 4 goals, 23 assists, 27 points. And I think Muzzin's been a better defenseman in Toronto than he was in LA. I do. I know people are going to say he's in Toronto, he can't be underrated. I think Muzzin is. I think all the attention goes to Riley. Certainly Hall gets a bunch right now. Dermott, of course, because expansion and whatnot. Muzzin's really good. And, of course, Brody came in and gets a lot of attention, too. I think Muzzin's just a really solid defenseman. That being said, another defenseman that's kind of caught in that depth chart situation, to me, is Matthias Ekholm. Ekholm is not on the list this year. But, yeah, it's hard to say why Ekholm doesn't get more press other than he plays with Yossi and Ellis. And, therefore, it's easy to forget that he's pretty solid defenseman as well. So Muzzin for me gets number 7. In part due to the fact that people will trash the the blue line for the Leafs, talk about how poor the blue line is for the Leafs. There's some truth to some of that, but I think they get more criticism than they deserve. Number 6, Vegas. How can you underrate somebody in Vegas? I think this defenseman's underrated. So they pick up Alex Pietrangelo, right? And Pietrangelo was solid. Zack Whitecloud, I thought, had an excellent season. And I think that he also had a pretty solid playoffs. And I think Zack Whitecloud is an excellent all-around defenseman for the Vegas Golden Knights. And he's one of those homegrown players. Vegas doesn't have a ton of them, but the ones they have, some of them have been excellent. And so, yeah, I give them full credit for their development of Whitecloud. I think he's been very good. And I think that, he's a solid piece of that blue line. Potentially for years to come. We'll see where Vegas's cap crunch ends up taking them and who stays and who goes. But for me, Whitecloud, number 6. Number 5. And it's a smaller list on this side because the logos aren't as tall, the way I cut them out. So that's why this side looks shorter than this side. Number 5. This again comes down to the fact that Jonas Brodin plays on a team that's got a very good defense core all around, right? So it's easy to overlook Brodin. And I don't know that Brodin ever gets Norris consideration necessarily, but Brodin is just such a solid, excellent, at times spectacular defenseman. And yeah, he's definitely underrated. If he misses a game, Minnesota is hurting on the blue line without him. I've become more and more of a Brodin fan every year. It's one of those players that if you watch all the hockey like I watch all the hockey, Brodin starts to really stand out. Number 5, and I agonized over this one. I did. I agonized over this one. Or number 4. Sorry, number 4. I just did number 5. Number 4. I was out in the sun today, so that's probably what it is. Number 4, I agonized over whether or not to put this one on the list, but I thought, you know what? For me, I think he's underrated. For me, I think Brett Pesce's underrated. Jacob Slavin was on this list a couple years ago. I'm putting Pesce up here now. Now, Pesce was 16th in Norris voting. So he does get noticed. He does get some praise, but 4 goals and 21 assists in 55 games. Pesce was sort of fantastic this year. So Jacob Slavin, to me, is still one of the best defensive defensemen in the league. Pesce's right there with him. Carolina has a remarkable blue line, and again, the fact that he plays in Carolina is going to allow Pesce to have a lower profile when we're talking about NHLers than he would have if he played for the Rangers, if he played in Toronto, if he played in Montreal. Pesce is just such a solid, maybe not as spectacular in as many ways as Brodin. You may not see that same level of offense, although he outproduced him in points. But still, Pesce is such a hard worker, and I think he gets underrated. Number 3, and I thought about this one, and I thought, well, you know what? Yeah. So we're going to Dallas on this one, and I do think that he's been underrated. I think Dallas had a poor season this year. Definitely not what they were expecting. So John Klingberg, maybe underrated at this point. 7 goals, 29 assists, 36 points in 53 games. And Klingberg, to me, is, and I know Miro Heiskanen is the star, right? Here, Heiskanen will be the better of the 2 defensemen. But all around, Klingberg, it's hard to find a weakness on Klingberg. It is really hard to find any part of Klingberg's game and go, well, that's a problem. I know as a Stars fan, I'm comfortable in any situation he's on the ice. And yeah, Klingberg to me, I think that he will eventually be one of those guys who gets a lot of votes for Norris. And I'm not saying first place necessarily, but third place, maybe a couple seconds, maybe fourth as well. But I think because of Dallas's season and because they were having trouble all year, I think Klingberg's excellent season kind of goes under the radar. Number 2. I'm going to Florida on this one. Now, normally this is where I'd put Mackenzie Weegar. Mackenzie Weegar this year finished, I think, 6th in Norris voting. So it's not Mackenzie Weegar. So at one point this year, the Florida Panthers lose Aaron Ekblad. Many, myself included, figured, well, that's going to hurt. That's going to be a problem. And the team did pretty well. But against Tampa Bay in the first round, you could see how much they missed Ekblad. And the thing with Ekblad is his defense is underrated as well. So he gets the 11 goals, 11 assists, 22 points in 35 games. Defensively, he's very solid. His defensive game was the knock on him, I'll say 2 years ago, was where people would say, well, but Ekblad defensively has got to work on it. Ekblad has become one of the better all-around defensemen in the league. And again, because he plays in Florida, he won't get as much attention as he might in one of the more public, one of the more popular organizations. So Ekblad, I think, is absolutely one of the most underrated defensemen. Which brings us to number one. And number one is Arizona. Now, again, this is one of those ones I kind of went back and forth on. And I'm going to explain why I think Jakob Chychrun is the most underrated defenseman in the league. 56 games, 18 goals, 23 assists for 41 points. 18 goals in 56 games. He was 10th. He was 10th in Norris voting. He had one first place vote. I'm guessing from somebody in the Arizona press. I didn't check to see who voted for who. But I'm guessing it's an Arizona presser that voted him first place. And normally you would look at that one outlying vote and go, well, that's a homer vote, or that's somebody who, just wanted Chychrun to be in the running, which happens. You feel like sometimes that there's times that a guy will get thrown a vote because media members will say, well, this guy doesn't get enough attention, much like as I'm talking about these 10 guys in this video. And so they'll throw him a vote because they don't think he gets enough attention. Chychrun's excellent. Chychrun is one of the best all-around defensemen in the league. And again, playing in Arizona, a team that had its struggles this year, it kind of covered up for the fact that Chychrun might be their most consistent offensive player, and his all-around game is really quite good. At some point in time in Chychrun's career, he has to be a finalist for the Norris. In my opinion, he has to be. And up until a couple years ago, I was on the fence as to how good he might be. He's an excellent defenseman. And to me, Jakob Chychrun might be the best kept secret in the league. And again, I know he was 10th in Norris voting, but when we get into talking about the best defenseman in the league, I don't see Chychrun's name very often. And I get it. I totally get it. There are a lot of people who may not have paid attention to Arizona this year, but hopefully with this coming season, people pay more attention to the Arizona Coyotes and to Jakob Chychrun, because I think he's a fantastic defenseman. So this is not a list meant to insult any defensemen that aren't on the list. This is a list meant to say, hey, these are 10 guys that I think we don't talk about enough. So my question for all of you fine viewers out there is, which defenseman in the NHL do you feel like doesn't get enough attention and is underrated by media, or by fans, or by both? Let me know in the comment section below. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I'll talk to you again soon.